Well, we're out here doing some postseason scouting, and it's a pretty cold, frigid February day, and Karen's making fun of me because he thinks I'm the poster boy for mismatched camo, but it keeps me warm, so that's all that matters. But we're out here doing some postseason scouting on a Pacific buck or specific buck bed, and trying to figure out where we can efficiently get set up and be close enough, but not too close, right? That's the question. Whether it's on the podcast or here on some of the YouTube stuff, everybody wants to hunt buck bedding. They want to hunt the B style. They want to learn to bump and dump. They want to, be a part of the buck bedding hunting craze. And the question is, how do you know when you're too close? How close is too close? How close is not close enough? Or how far is not close enough? So we're going to walk you through a scenario last year. We were in here doing some in-season scouting, and we found this rub line. As you can see here, there's a decent sized rub lower on a tree, and then right behind me there's 3 or 4 other rubs kind of all leading in that general direction. And the reason we were back in here was we have a cell camera about 200 yards over in a pinch towards the primary food source, and we were getting a buck kind of coming from this northerly direction, kind of headed south, and then he would head west into that food source. So we're trying to backtrack him, trying to figure out where he was coming from. And get close enough to get set up on him and have a shot in daylight, because he was always showing up 40-45 minutes after shooting light. So we got back here, found these rubs, and kind of followed this around, and there's a thicker thicket over in a kind of wet marshy area over here. We thought that the deer was bedded there. So after we found these rubs, we were kind of walking through this property and actually bumped that buck out of his bed. And when I say bump, I physically saw him stand up out of his bed and leave, and we followed his exit trail, and that led us to another rub line. So we want to show you guys that specific bed and where we're going to set up or plan to set up on that buck. So let's go take a look at the area where we actually physically saw this deer stand up, and take a look at what that looks like. So in October, when we found these rubs, we were kind of haphazardly making our way back through this property. We got over this cluster of trees right here, and we're only probably 30 yards from where we were just at. And Jason and I were kind of standing here talking candidly, and we physically saw this deer stand up out of this little point, this bedding point of this thicket, and watched him take his exit trail. So from this bed, we're within 50 yards right here. And kind of these 2 rub lines signify 2 different ways of travel. This deer could either be getting up out of this bed and coming this way in this direction, headed east, and then probably headed south back around that major food source. But one of the things that we found after we bumped this deer was another rub on his exit trail, which then led to a stand of white oaks. And in that stand of white oaks, there was a scrape. So what we think that deer was doing was actually standing up here out of this bed, circling around to the north with the westerly wind in his face, feeding on these oaks, checking that scrape, and then making his way up to that primary food source, all within 45 minutes. So let's go take a look at what that actually looks like. So a couple small rubs on the edge of this thick stuff here. So right on the point of this thicket, you can actually see in the snow that there's a small bed here. And there's a couple rubs out over here, right over here to my right, a couple small rubs on the inside, and then some rubs that we just showed you on the way in, out on this open stuff. So we physically watched this deer stand up somewhere on this point. Without snow on the ground, we would never see that bed, and I would assume from my memory that this deer was bedded over here, but he took this exit trail around this point out into this open timber. But from right here, if you were standing here where this deer's bedded, you can look out into all this open, and there's no way to get within 100 yards of this bed anywhere in this open direction. It's just not possible. Even though with a westerly wind, the wind's blowing over this deer's back out of this, across this point, and he's looking out into this open, and there's physically no way to get in here. Maybe you could come from the south, but this property typically has some type of southerly kick because of the openness, and it kind of creates a wind tunnel right here. So not only does the deer have the prevailing wind over his back, he gets this pull from the south through here, and he can look out into all this open. So the only way to access this to get within 75 yards, 100 yards, is to come from the north, which is not an option for us because we don't have access. And there's just not, this property is super narrow, and it's just not wide enough for us to make a circle or to make a loop and kind of cut this deer off. So when we saw this deer physically stand up and leave his bed, he went over into this open timber, and we're going to show you that rub line real quick. So as we make our way over to what was his exit trail, we notice there's a couple more beds here, so this bedding kind of shifts. And again, guys want to talk about, does a deer have one bed? Does he have multiple beds? And just in this scenario, within 30 or 40 yards, there's 3 beds. And I'm sure this deer's getting up using this on different winds or different weather days or whatever the case may be. But all within 30 yards, there's 3 beds. This deer kind of moving around in the same general area. As you can see, there's a small rub here, another rub over here, leading out into this open timber where he could visually see and also have that wind advantage coming from the west to his nose, where we could circle around and eat acorns in the evening, or during the day, get up, browse on some of this high stem count stuff without actually physically moving from the security cover. So how do you hunt a deer like this? We threw a couple sits at it in 2021 and we struck out miserably. But now in the postseason, kind of putting all this together, seeing these beds, knowing where these rub lines are, being able to see all the open sign, going back and looking at the trail camera pictures, knowing that he's 45 minutes after daylight in coming from a couple different directions. Now we can go through and kind of pick kill trees out where we can go in and set these stands up in the spring, get all our trimming done. And so when fall comes and the time is right, we can just go in and hunt it. So how close is too close? Well, I'm going to pull my phone out. I'm going to drop a pin in this general bedding area, this general bedding location, and walk to the tree that we have picked out so we can show you exactly how far we are from this bedding area. The tree that we have picked out is essentially right here, right over my shoulder. And we have this tree picked out for a couple of reasons. One is the wind. So with a westerly wind and even with a southerly tail to it, which again, with this property being open through this center portion, a lot of times you have a southerly tail here. So you have to pay attention to what the habitat and the terrain vegetation is doing, because it might not always be a wind that's forecasted on the Weather Channel or your weather app. But knowing that it has a southerly kick to it with a westerly wind, that deer can still bed there, not smell us from this tree. And if he chooses to work this way with the wind at his advantage, he's not going to know that we're there until it's too late. So when he gets inside this 20-yard bubble, he's going to know something's up. And at that point, you better have your bow drawn back and ready to shoot. Another reason why we picked this tree is the visual advantage we can get as far as sneaking in here. So we can sneak through this timber, clear an access trail out. That's one thing that we'll do, is come in and clear an access trail, clean the brush up, where we can sneak in from that destination food source, that primary food source, because they're not going to be there in the afternoon. So this would be an evening hunt for us, or an evening set. Sneak in through here and get up into that tree without that deer visually seeing us. And one thing to note with that, you see all the underbrush and you see the growth, and this stuff is 7, 8, 9 feet tall. That's a set that we're not going to put 20 feet in the air. We're going to probably stay down that 8, 9, 10, maybe 11 foot height, because we have all this stuff blocking the visual advantage of that deer. So if you get too far up, the higher you get, the more open that set becomes, and the odds of that deer seeing you actually increase. So those are 3 things that you have to pay attention to when you're kind of walking yourself through the scenario of how close is too close. 1 is the wind. 2 is the visual advantage the deer has. How can you manipulate or use any kind of vegetation or terrain to gain access to your spot? And the last thing would be, you have to be close enough where that deer is going to make it obviously past here within shooting light. So we're going to actually walk over here, see what the walking distance between the bed and this tree was, and then draw a straight line and see exactly how far this tree is. Because right now we think this is the ideal tree. We're letting the deer have the wind, yet we have the wind. We're letting the deer have a visual advantage, yet we have a visual advantage. We let the deer think he has a bulletproof bed, yet we have clean access. So let's go over and take a look at the tree and see exactly how far we are. So we just pulled onX up, we're standing behind the tree, and again, if this isn't common sense, walking into this set, we're not going to go walk around the front of the tree. We're going to gain access and climb up the rear part of this tree and use the trunk that gives us the most cover. So again, I'm not going super high here. Probably 8-9 feet is probably all we're going to be. But looking at onX on that tracker, we've only walked, didn't even hardly register. So let's use the map tool and do line distance from point A to point B. So drawing a straight line the way the crow flies, this set is exactly 75 yards from that bed. So we are really tight within that bubble, and this is really maybe possibly being too close. Coming over here in one of these trees, maybe on the edge of this timber, might be a better option. But then looking at the shooting situation, if this deer skirts around one of these islands through this thick, heavy cover, you might not have that opportunity. And coming in here this tight to bedding, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 shots at this, and then the gig's going to be up because he's going to know that you're in here. So this is the tree that we have picked. This is the kill site we have picked. And ultimately, how close is too close, you won't know until you go in and either make a mistake or you kill that buck. If you kill him, you know it's perfect. If you booger it up, well, then you're too close. But if you don't see him, you're probably too far away. So that's it. We hope this video makes sense. This is us just kind of breaking this down, putting this stuff together in a real world scenario with data we've collected through trail cameras and postseason scouting. So it's super important that you guys are doing this stuff, analyzing those trail camera pictures, going back through those scenarios, maybe mistakes, failures, and learn from that stuff from the previous hunting season, and tying it all in with your postseason scouting and kind of being ahead of the game for 2022. So if you like this video, be sure to leave a comment below, ask some questions, and smash that subscribe button for us.